Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of the King Kong Trail. And I am sitting here with Michael Lair. How you doing?
Great. How you doing, bud?
I'm doing good. It has been a long time since I've last seen you.
Probably 30 years.
Yeah. I remember the first time I met you. I'd known about you because of the band Crystal Vision,
Uh-huh.
and because Nick Strickland
Yep.
played in it.
Yep.
And he lived right down
Rest
the street
in
from
peace,
us on 7th Street. Oh, what a guy.
Yeah.
What a guy.
Amazing talent.
But the first time I met you, you were the boss on a detasseling crew.
That is hilarious because I was just telling some guys I'm on a work trip up in Madison, Wisconsin the last couple weeks, and that's how I was able to make it down here this weekend. And I was just telling some guys from a younger generation all about detasseling, and they had no idea.
I don't. I've looked in the paper during the summertime. I may have seen one, but they don't. Do they not do that anymore?
I have no. I've been out of Iowa so long, I'm so disconnected from that.
I try to stay out of the cornfields. You know?
Right.
Children of the Corn.
Right.
I've seen that movie. Don't want any anymore.
Malachi.
Yeah. So, you went to high school mid '80s.
Yeah. Yep. Graduated in '86.
Okay.
Just sounds crazy.
I graduated in '89, which, yeah, I hear you. Tell me about a little bit about your upbringing here in Burlington and some of the things you remember.
Well, born and raised here, obviously. Grew up over on Mount Pleasant, like the Lincolnville area over there.
Yep.
And then went to North Hill, then graduated over to Oak Street, which I know North Hill's still there, but it's been rebuilt.
Yeah.
Oak Street, I don't even believe exists anymore.
Oak Street is actually still there. The school, the building exists, and it is a pain clinic and Dr. Hendricks.
Oh, okay.
And he's the one that did the surgery on my boy on his arm.
They found a way to repurpose the building.
Yes. But just a little corner of it. I don't know what they're doing with the rest of it.
Yeah, I went to middle school there. My class of '86, was the last ninth grade class at Apollo.
Okay.
So we went to Apollo. That was the '82-'83 school year.
Okay.
That's when Gibby's was still there. A lot of old timers remember that place. And then obviously went out to the main high school for the rest of the time. And then, after that, went to college up in Waterloo briefly. Kind of got an itch and started moving around, but I was pretty much out of Burlington by the time I was about 18.
Yeah. A lot of people try to get out. I've been out so many times, and it just
Draws
pulls
you
you
back.
back in.
Well, there's some really
Yeah.
good people here. You know?
Oh yeah. It's a good place to bring up your kids.
Yeah.
We've got some problems with some drugs and guns and stuff
Mm-hmm.
like that, but for the most part, it's a good, safe place to bring up kids and enjoy life.
Especially when you got some history here. You know?
Yeah,
So.
exactly. Tell me about your musical career and how did you get the itch to start playing and singing and that?
Well, I've always been like really, really into music. Started with Kiss, obviously, like the rest of us, but never really considered to try, playing in a band or putting a band together or anything. Didn't have any musical skills or abilities that I was aware of coming out of the gate. I think when I was about 15, something like that, I ran into a guy that's been around here for quite a while, Jerry Darnold.
Uh-huh.
Yep, he was playing with the guys from Rude Awakening.
Yes.
And I remember it to this day. He walked up to me at 7-Eleven over on Mount Pleasant Street. It's not there any longer, but it's something convenience store now. And I kind of was sporting the little Camaro mullet, whatever type thing.
Classic.
And everybody kind of knew I was hoodlum rocker or whatever. And he approached me and asked me if I'd be interested in trying out as a singer for their band. And I was like, I don't really sing, but what the heck? And I remember going over and giving it a shot, and all the guys, Scott Jagger, Dave Schwarm, Matt Waugh, and then Jerry. Jerry's playing bass at the time. Anyhow, got the gig playing with those guys, and I think we immediately they were kind of messing around with some cover tunes. They were all really young.
Oh.
I think Jerry was the only one older than me, and the rest of the guys were like 13 or 14 or something. We were a total kid band, and kind of suggested, well, hey, let's try some original stuff, and anyhow went by way of that and started writing a few little things, and I think we went up and did a demo up at the Musicians Pro Shop with Joel Kipp up there, and it was fun. Played a few. My very first show was the Memorial Auditorium.
Okay.
I think we played like midway through a Tri-State Sound Light Show dance or something like that.
Oh,
yeah,
those
are fun.
Yeah, we'll have to talk about that.
Well, I ended up playing with those guys for a while, and then I met Nick Strickland, whom we were talking about earlier, and I just happened to meet him at the high school or something. We were in the same grade, but he was kind of, didn't have a real strong presence, personality, whatever. That was somebody that really stood out to me as anybody that I knew or associated with or whatnot. So I knew his face and whatnot, but I just didn't know who he was or what his backstory was. And we started chatting one day, and he says, well, I play guitar. And I said, yeah, that's cool. And he goes, yeah, you should come over sometime, and, we'll jam out. And I went over to his house at the time, and I kid you not, the guy had, he didn't have anything for gear. He had a stereo speaker that was like hot wired to kind of an electric guitar or something. And so I went in there and I was kind of like chuckling to myself. I was like, are you kidding? And the guy sat down and he just started shredding out like Metallica or something.
Right.
And I was blown away. I was like, it's like, sometimes people refer to other folks as prodigies. I mean, he truly was a prodigy.
Right.
And he'd been playing for like a month or something. And
Right.
I was just blown away. So, I went back to the guys in the band. I said, we got to get this guy in the band. We got to get this guy in the band. And he, of course, they were all buddies and everything. And so they were just like, no, this is our kind of our gang. And at the time, obviously, there was a little bit of animosity. But looking back, it made sense why they made the decision they did. And I don't hold anything against any one of them. So I immediately, like at the very onset of my career, I busted off and formed my own band with Nick. We ended up landing a bass player from Danville named Steve Hobson. Do you know Steve?
I don't think so.
He's been around I think he's still around the area as far as I know, but he was a little bit older than us. I think he was maybe just out of high school or something. And then Matt Schulte was our first drummer. And we had our little quartet, and I think we went right back into the studio and did some demos, and it was all just experimental. I had no idea what it meant to sing on key, and
Right.
the things were just not, but we were kind of feeling our way out as far as, putting this whole thing together. There were a few personnel changes over the years where we had like, I think Matt Schulte left, and then we brought on Brian. Gosh, we're still friends to this day. I'll remember his last name here in a minute. But there was a few personnel changes throughout the years, and then we did at the very end of the Crystal Vision era, which was maybe from 85 to 87. It's so weird because it was such a small period of time, but it seems like so much went on
Right.
during that time. And so during the very last recording we did a I think it was White Horse Recording Studio up in Rock Island, Illinois.
Okay.
And that one was pretty good. I think it was like 8 songs. It was kind of our album, although we didn't, press it on vinyl, but we had cassettes, which we sold and whatnot. And there was a pretty good response to it. I mean, I think locally people liked it and whatnot. And then, of course, after that we disbanded. I think Nick went down to Memphis to pursue music. I went to college. So everybody kind of, went their own way. And so, yeah, that was pretty much the inception and duration of Crystal Vision. I think was about a 2 or 3 year
Right.
period of time.
Now, when we talk about Nick, we kind of need to put a little historical African American kid.
Yeah. Yep.
When I was at that time in my life, the only person that I ever knew that was African American was Jimi Hendrix.
Right. That played
That
rock
pl-
music.
exactly.
Right. Hard rock. Yeah.
And he was a super humble, nice kid. We made amplifiers out of the same type of thing. We had a 6x9
Right.
speaker out of it. Believe it or not, out of a 8-track player.
Uh-huh.
And he may have showed us how to do it or whatever. But what a great kid he was.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I heard he got leukemia or something.
Yeah, he was diagnosed with leukemia, I think, when we were maybe around 19 or so.
Mm-hmm.
He had been down in, like I said, when we split up, and I do remember the final lineup of the band. It was Brian Walsh, drummer, who later on went and played with a series of other local bands. I think he even performing as the lead singer. Wish I would have known that when we were jamming. We maybe could have had some cool harmonies. But Brian Walsh and then Tim Baldwin was our second guitarist, and it was the five of us, including Steve Hobson. That was our final lineup. And then when we disbanded, I went up to Hawkeye Tech, not real college, art school. Let's just get that out on the table there. People go, he went to college? Well, initially art school, and then Nick went to Memphis, and then I got word somewhere along the way. I'm sure it was from Nick because we stayed in touch. That he'd been diagnosed with leukemia, and then by that time I'd already moved on, I think, to L.A. And I can kind of give a rundown of that coming up, but I was somewhere else in the country, and I do remember coming back, and I believe he was in the hospital up in Iowa City, and I played him like a demo tape of whatever band I was working with at the time, and
Right.
he was just so impressed, and how far I had evolved, personally and whatnot, and we just had a real good talk. And the thing that I really want to make sure everyone knows is that Nick was a sold out believer in Jesus Christ. Mm-hmm. So I just thank God that he was, and I got the message later, maybe after going and visiting him at the hospital. Maybe a few months or so, my sister gave me a call out in Colorado and told me that he had passed. Mm-hmm. And it was really hard for myself, my family, and anybody that knew him, because he was a good guy and good brother. But he was a believer, and I believe the story that I was told was that even his as he was dying, he had to. This is what I heard secondhand, but he was consoling his nurse because his nurse was so upset and heartbroken that he was passing.
Right.
But he had so much faith in where he was spending eternity that was always, I thought, a really cool story.
I spoke with a lady that lost her son to leukemia just recently, a week or so before this one airs, and it's always the people that have, when they're passing, they have the most peace.
Right.
Especially the Christians, where we believe, 100% that where we're going,
Mm-hmm.
And I remember talking to Nick, him telling me about, hey, you guys got to come up, and we're just playing up at the church right up here, and we just jam around. And it's like, back in those days, I wanted nothing to do with Christianity.
Yeah, myself as well.
And, but, looking back, at that is a comfort.
Mm-hmm.
That he is.
He was a good guy. I'm glad I got to know him. I think he was. It just blows my mind to think of where he would be now, musically speaking. Because, like I said, a few months into playing guitar, and he was just shredding leads. And I know he went on later on to. He started playing keyboards. Mm-hmm. He had potential as a singer. He was a great songwriter. The earliest stuff that Crystal Vision did was. Nick wrote most of the stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I really felt blessed to have been able to spend that little bit of time jamming with him.
Yeah.
Starting off my music career.
Yeah. And we discussed Nick because he's part of Burlington history.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And I got a message the other day of somebody living in France listening and watching the podcast because we're talking about Burlington stuff, and it's like, that is awesome. And I
Yeah.
never thought that anybody outside of Burlington, but it's carrying on, to people that aren't around here anymore.
Right.
So, yeah. So, what brings you back to this area? Do you have family here?
Yeah, my folks still. My mom lives over in the house that we grew up in on Daner Street, off of Mount Pleasant Street over there. So I try to come back and see her as often as I can. And my dad, they've been separated since I was a little kid, but they're both remarried. And my dad and his wife, they live up in New London. All my siblings are gone. They're either Iowa City or New Mexico or somewhere else. But I do try to get back and see the folks. So, like I said, because I was on that work trip in Madison, it was only 4 hours. So I figured I'd hop down and spend the weekend with the folks. And you'd reached out to me, inviting me over. So I thought, hey, that works out well.
Yeah, and I'm glad you came. I'm
Yeah.
glad you came. So you escaped Burlington, went to school. Now, hold on. I want to talk about something that happened in high school.
Yeah.
Didn't the prom get canceled?
Oh, that one.
Let's talk about that.
Sure.
Because I've mentioned that, and some people are like, I think I remember. What happened with that?
Well, so it all begins basically with me just I'm extremely stubborn. I'm just, one of those guys that I don't like to be told no, for better or for worse, Sometimes it works out in my favor, sometimes it doesn't. But I remember back in high school, there was talk on our junior year that they were going to cancel the prom, the senior prom for the class of '86 because we didn't raise enough money.
Oh.
And I'm sure there was some legitimacy to that looking back now, but for me, I kind of thought it's a dance, It's like I just kind of felt that it was I don't know. I thought it was just a little bit too extreme as far as what their decision was. Mm-hmm. And on a more superficial level, I'd made a date with this really cute girl from Mediapolis, Michelle Wishmeyer, and I made a date with her for like 2 years saying, will you go to my senior prom with me? And she said she would. And that was kind of a tongue in cheek, but it was really kind of just one of those against the establishment type of things.
Footloose type thing.
Yeah. It just didn't seem like, like I said, okay, yeah, so maybe the class didn't raise enough money, but we're just talking about a dance. This doesn't cost thousands of dollars, Apparently that's what they had concurred. And so then I just basically went out and said, I'm going to do my own prom. And it was so unlikely because, I wasn't really an academic back then. I wasn't known for my academic prowess. I was a little scraggly looking and
here's my
I
school
remember
ID.
you.
and read the school that I attended.
University Alternative High School.
Yes.
Yep.
Basement of the Apollo.
Yep.
So I can concur that I was not the academic type either.
So I was the unlikely guy to do that in some instances, but I don't remember how it all played out. I just remember the reason that it was a success was because of the publicity that was made as soon as I declared I was going to do it. Mm-hmm. And then I had so many people come on board that helped me.
Right.
I could. There was, I think there was a guy named, I want to say his first name was John, and forgive me if I get your first name wrong, but his last name was Champagne. I think it was John Champagne. I know it was Mike Campbell. Anyhow, those guys brought a sound system in, did the sound. Mm-hmm. I had a whole bunch of lovely ladies come and do decorations. We had a friend, my dad's, I think they were boyfriend, girlfriend at the time, but it's a gal that I graduated with, Trisha Heidgerk, and her mom, Vicky, worked at the Holiday Inn. Is it still the Holiday Inn out there?
Let's see. No, the Holiday Inn is across the street now.
Yeah, this is on Mount Pleasant.
Howard Johnson.
Okay, that's right.
Now.
Yeah, and she worked there as like the event coordinator or something. And like I said, my dad and her had passed. So I had an in with her, and she helped me secure the room. And I even had I wish I could remember his name. It's in the write-up. I still have a newspaper article from it.
Yeah.
But there was a deputy sheriff that lived down the street, and he had read the article, and he actually donated his time, which those are things I didn't think about.
Sure.
You need some law enforcement there, which we didn't. It was
Crazy
very...
kids out there probably going drinking.
Right. Had one of the area photographers come in and do the photography. Had a whole slew. My parents, including other people's parents, donated their time as chaperones. Those are things I didn't think of. So it was kind of one of those things. I started the fire, but a bunch of people jumped in on it. And I worked in the print shop at Burlington High School, so I was able to make the prom tickets. They wouldn't let me sell them on school property,
Sure.
so I had to sell them at Mazio's. So
Right.
give props to Mazio's for that. And I brought in enough money that I was able to rent the Regency room at the Holiday Inn. I don't know if there was really even a lot. I mean, we voted, had a king and queen. I mean, people dressed up, rode limos, and it was pretty cool.
Yeah. I love that story. Sticking it to the man.
Right, exactly.
Did the school, I mean, you said they wouldn't let you sell them on, did they give you grief about?
Yeah, they weren't happy with me. Like I said, I can look back and understand, but it was also one of those things that just goes to show you that, my whole thing was proving to them this doesn't have to cost thousands of dollars.
Right.
You can do it. It's just a dance, and maybe they had some sort of, template that they use that, they said this is how we've done it before and we just know. And maybe the way they did, produce things for previous classes, it did cost a lot. But I think the coolest thing, though, and I'll go back, I'm kind of going back on this again, but was that everybody came together. So many people, and I'm sure I'm missing a whole bunch of people, and forgive me if there's any folks out there that were a part of that I'm not giving you props because it was so long ago. I just remember the guys that did the sound system, and those that helped me get the room and the set up the decorations and whatnot. But it was a fun time.
Yeah. You're talking about dances when you talked about the Mid-State Soundlight.
Tri-State.
Tri-State.
Yep.
And they put the dances on at the auditorium.
Yep. Every Saturday night.
And it was, you look back and I think, man, I don't remember seeing a whole lot of people dancing.
No.
But everybody walked in the circle.
Well, the girls danced.
Yeah.
That's what it was. The girls would okay, here was the routine. The girls would all dance, and it was like something from National Geographic. And then all the guys would walk in a circle around. And as soon as Stairway to Heaven came on, all the guys went inward, picked a girl, and danced. And then when it got, then when things went to the next level, they were up in the balcony or bleachers or whatever, smooching. And back then I remember being kind of above that. You're thinking, oh, this is, there's got to be something better than this. But when I look back now, it was like I went into the auditorium years ago, the band, one of the more recent bands I played in, came back and did a show at the Steamboat Days. And I walked into the Memorial Auditorium for the first time, and it was like surreal because I hadn't been in there since 10th 11th grade or something like that, and it was like really weird walking through there, and it brought back a lot of memories. And I thought we were really fortunate to have that.
Yeah. I don't think anybody puts on dances anymore. Every once in a while, a few years ago, I used to hear of a glow stick thing or something. I'm not quite sure, but I don't think it really grabbed on.
Right. Yeah.
But this,
well, we had that, and we also had the park. So we cruised Crapo Park.
Cruise in the street.
That was one of our songs.
Yes, it was.
That's funny.
Yeah, that was. Man, we got in trouble out at the park.
Yeah.
Well, I got away with it. My brother and my cousin, two cops just come out of nowhere, doing what you're doing at the park, having a little drink.
Right.
And, yeah.
Your brother's Darren, right?
Yes.
Is he older or younger?
He is 18 months older.
Okay, that's what I thought. Right.
He graduated in 87. I followed in 89.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
People don't understand. I tell, even my older sons, I have two sons that are grown now that are both 20, and I tell them about what I did, and it doesn't register. You know, it was just like they go, so I don't get it. You just like went out to the park and you sat on the side of the road, and people. It's just, but it was. We didn't have phones. We didn't have 800 channels. We didn't, you know, maybe a few people had like Pong or something. But, and it was kind of, you know, my oldest son, his name's Elijah, and you got a Eli as well. He even, when he was younger one time, we talked about that. And he said, I remember he said, I would trade all of the technology for today to be able to go back and have, oh, I know what it was, because we didn't have hardly any kids in our neighborhood, and then the few that were there would never come outside. And I said, you know, I counted it up one time in my little 4-block area where I grew up. We're talking an age range from, you know, maybe 15 years, you know, a difference from the youngest to the oldest. There was somewhere close to 50 to 60 kids.
Yeah.
And my oldest son said, I would give anything to go back and have a childhood like that. And we did, you know.
Yeah.
So, and the park was part of it. You know,
Yeah.
that was like coming of age. It was everybody in their hot rods and sitting on the side of the road, and some people indulging in certain things and others indulging in others. And the end game was to find someone of the opposite sex that were mutually attracted to one another. That
Yes.
was really it.
Yeah.
Or to
Yeah.
play Frisbee golf.
Yeah. Oh man, you'd stop off at Carpenter's.
Because you could buy there.
You could buy there.
That's so funny.
And
Wine coolers.
Yes. And you know, or you found somebody that was old enough, and kids don't have that these
Nope,
days. You know, they'll sit on their you know, my
Devices.
my boy's out there with his friend playing Minecraft. They love
Right.
Minecraft, but you know, go outside and go outside, break your arm. But he's the most adventurous one.
Well, that's good.
Yeah,
That's
so,
good. There's still hope.
I kind of expected that he would be the first one to do that. But,
Right.
And my other son's down at B-Town Comic playing Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh, okay.
So there's some interaction there.
And we played video games. I mean, you had to pay for, you know, it was $0.25 a pop. We'd go to 7-Eleven up there, and one of my really good friends, one of the few guys I've just maintained a friendship with over the last 40 years is Tom Banks. In fact, we were just hanging out last night, and that was he and I. We'd go up to 7-Eleven and just drop our quarters in there and play Donkey Kong until we mastered the thing. But that was just kind of a side note. The main thing was, you know, riding mopeds, going to the dances, going to the park, you know. And so it was a pretty good childhood.
Yeah. I had my first video system was Pong. That was my last video system. I just never really got into it.
Yeah.
You know, it was fun to play when when it was time to go to bed. Oh, I want to play a game.
Right.
But nothing like what the kids do today.
No.
And then we didn't have the money to go play the video games at the store, but when we moved out to West Burlington for a few years, the mall had just opened.
Oh, okay.
Woolworths. You could go in there, and they had an Atari set up for, you know, here, play this and buy the video system.
Right.
You know, we'd being in West Burlington, we'd just go down there and play Donkey Kong or whatever it was, you know, for as long as we could before they kicked us out.
Remember the video arcade that they had out the mall?
Aladdin's Castle.
Aladdin's Castle. Yeah.
I think it's still there. It might be the same
Really?
name.
Wow.
But
I can't imagine that anybody would go to an arcade now and drop money.
no, it really is. The whole mall is a ghost town.
Yeah, it's too bad. I used to. Chumley's was out there. That they had the best tacos.
Somebody had advertised that they were making Chumley style tacos.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, do you know who?
It was Wake and Bake.
Oh, really?
Wow.
Wow.
So I'm going to Taco Tuesday. I think I'm going to head down.
Sounds good.
Yeah, but oh man, you couldn't be. And I never realized that you could have a second level at the mall.
Right.
You know,
They had the upstairs with the
Yeah.
pool tables. And,
yeah.
Yep.
Where that was just odd.
Right. Yeah. My buddy Max Bumgardner used to work out there.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Well, I remember that it would be Tuesday at the mall, and then they had Chumley's downtown, and I think theirs was Thursdays.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, we go out, we destroy some tacos.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
Um,
Because they have, I think, didn't they have like all you can eat or something?
Yes.
I know out
Yes.
at the mall they did.
Yeah,
Right.
It was all you can eat, and boy, we tried to.
Well, we were talking about the ritual, the mating ritual at the dances
Mm-hmm.
at the mall. It was kind of a similar thing where you'd go out there. Nobody was shopping.
Yeah.
We didn't have any money, but you'd go out and you'd make your rounds
Mm-hmm.
and you'd walk around. And so it's kind of sad that that place is kind of coming to an end because there was a lot of memories out there as well.
Yeah. I think my daughters asked. I could probably count on one hand. We want to go hang out at the mall. Okay, I know you're safe out there
Right.
because nothing.
Exactly.
But wow, yeah, good times.
Yeah, exactly.
So now, when you left Burlington, you'd actually made it out to L.A., right?
Yeah, I moved around just a little. Again, it's so weird because when I think back to a 6 month or 1 year time period back in the day, now it equates to like years. I think about it, it's like, oh yeah, but I don't know, it's a weird time warp thing or something. But there was a period of time after I left here. I went to Waterloo, went to Hawkeye Tech, did a couple semesters there, bailed on that, kind of like I did everything else, and then came back here for a little while. Just briefly lived up in Mount Pleasant and worked at Alaniz and Sons. And Nick, that's when Nick and I had regrouped with our bass player, and so we were all living together in a house up there. Real brief period of time, and then started getting an itch to move again. And by this time, I was like myself, Nick, a guy from New London, and then another buddy of mine, Todd Hedges. We'd all conspired to buy a large vehicle or a van and move to L.A. And we were so I was just talking about this last night because I ran into Todd, and we were talking about how naive we were because we thought we're going to move out to L.A., we'll just sleep on the beach, we'll take, it's just, we were so ignorant. We were total bumpkins.
But that was the perception that L.A. put out.
Right. You just think, oh, I can go out there and sleep. Well, it gets cold out there. And then we moved out there in January, and it gets cold. But long story short, everybody backed out except Todd and I. So we loaded up. I had a little Mercury Zephyr that my dad had given me, and we loaded that up. And I remember filling up with gas in Mount Pleasant, and it was the very beginning of January of 1988, and it was 20 below zero here. So I was like, time to go. Anyhow, we sojourned out there, and I had my dad's uncle lived out there at the time, so that was kind of like a pit stop when we first got there. And I think there was a real kind of divine serendipity type thing because we probably should have just put our tails between our legs and came back home because we didn't have enough money to like rent a place or anything. But my great uncle's wife had she knew an actress an aspiring actress that lived up in Hollywood, right in Hollywood, and so she knew I was an aspiring musician, so she wanted me put me in touch with her, and her name was Judy Simpson, and so I went up there. She lived right off Sunset Boulevard. Met with her, and she's a super nice lady, little probably middle age at the time. She was from Minnesota, and she said, well, where are you guys staying? And we said, we don't know. The beach. And so she goes, well, why don't you stay here? And so that was really, without that, there would have been no L.A.
Right.
We would have just come right back. So I had that opportunity. We stayed there. Unfortunately, Todd didn't have a car, so it was real difficult for him. And he came back before I did. But I ended up staying out there for about 1 year and 3 months, formed a band of my own out there, which was called Savior. We were a Christian rock heavy metal band, kind of in the Striper vein.
Right.
And by that time, I had accepted the Lord as my Savior. And so, I was making an attempt.
Sure.
I was still, young and rambunctious and wanting to live in the world, but I was trying, and I did get together a good group of guys, and we, the very first guy that I met up with that helped me form the band was, and this is a little side note, but I think it'd be interesting. His name was Jaime Castillo, and he was a pretty good drummer, but not the greatest super great guy. One of you know, when I think back of all my great friends in my life, he's at the top. And once we got the band established, we got going. We were kind of like, Jaime's not really cutting it on drums. We needed somebody that was a little bit stronger. And it just so happened that the bass player that we had knew a guy and suggested we bring him on board. And so I told my buddy, you know, because we were friends, and he understood. You know, it sucks when you get let go from a band, but he understood, and we remained friends. Well, subsequent to that, he had answered an ad in the local magazine out there for musicians where you'd post your classifieds, and he joined up with a guy that he started jamming with. And that's about all I knew of it at the time. After playing about a year and shy of a year and a half out in L.A., you know, I played Gazzari's, the Troubadour, the Roxy, I don't know if we played the Whiskey. I can't remember, but pretty much all the premier,
all the places you would read about in Hit Parade.
Right. Like if you go back and watch the decline of Western civilization, that old metal movie from the documentary, I lived part of that. So that was cool. I caught the very tail end of it. And, you know, I had the long hair and the, you know, snakeskin boots and everything that people laugh about now.
Yeah.
And rightfully so, but then I look at him and go, you have no idea how cool.
Yeah, you were cool.
You have no idea how cool that was back then. And but back to my friend Jaime, after I'd done my little stint out there, you know, I got a little homesick and not really homesick, but just feeling like LA was a little bit too big for me. Made a move to Colorado after that, but subsequently, not long after I'd moved to Colorado, I had kept in touch with my friend Jaime, who was the original drummer of my band Savior out there, and then he had declared that he had met with this guy, and he's playing with a Ministry band, and that I never really understood the dynamic. They were kind of all living together, and now I'm understanding it was a cult.
Oh.
I didn't know what a cult was back then. Again, pretty naive, but so he had literally joined a cult, not unbeknownst to me at the time.
Right.
And so, you know, we're talking, and he's like, yeah. He goes, you know what? He contacted me in Colorado and said, yeah, we moved down to Texas and living down in Waco, Texas.
Uh-oh, I think I know where this is
going. You know, yeah.
Wow.
He was part of the Branch Davidian.
Wow.
Yeah, and he knew Dave. He played it. Like, in fact, when you watch, sometimes they'll show old footage from the Branch Davidian and the whole story on it. Sometimes you'll see him. He had real long, black, curly hair. He was a Hispanic brother. But he ended up playing bass in the Koresh thing.
Right.
I spoke to David Koresh on the phone one time. We were having a conversation while he was down there because I'm still trying to wrestle with this. Everywhere I went, I had to get a job.
Right.
You know, I was like, got a job, got an apartment, started a band. And I kept saying, well, what are you doing for work? And he's like, I don't know. We're kind of doing, you know, fixing up things and this and that. And he never really defined that he had a job. So
right.
I never really understood. But a bunch of people were all living together and this and that. And he was, and the leader of his band was his pastor, and his name was David Koresh. And he goes, hey, you know, I'd love to have you talk to him. Got on the phone, was talking to him. You know, he was trying to tell me something all about the Seven Seals, and very charismatic. I mean,
right.
A nice guy. We had a nice conversation, but he was like, yeah, you ought to come down sometime. And I was like, you know, nah, I'm good. And so then at this time, still not knowing that it's a cult, what's going on, whatever, it was maybe a month or two after that phone conversation that I heard on the news that what had happened in Waco, Texas, and I started putting all these things together.
Right.
Called my friend Jaime's mom out in L.A. and said she knew immediately it was me, and she didn't speak much English, but she's like, oh, me, you know, and so then I knew. And then I found out, and in fact, in Denver, the news stations came to my apartment at the time and interviewed me about it.
Really?
Because I had like a direct I still had the phone number of the Branch Davidian on my caller ID at home.
That gives you
well, and as for those that don't know the whole story on that, most of the people died that did not surrender up front. I I think there were I'm never sure if it's 7 or 9 survivors after the dust was settled, and all those unfortunate children and everyone perished in that. Well, my friend Jaime was one of the ones who survived.
Wow.
And because he did not he did not come out initially, when they had kind of made the plea bargain deal, they charged him with conspiracy. In fact, some of the guys that did come out in the back and never got charged with anything, but unfortunately he did.
Right.
Ended up being sentenced to like 40 years to life in a federal penitentiary. Wow. And we stayed in touch all those years. I still kept all the letters that we stayed during the time we remained pen pals. And he had such good spirit every time I would talk to him on the phone sometimes, and he was just, everything was always like, he really didn't talk about the cult that much. He said, I didn't operate any weapons. I was a musician. I was playing music there. And he never denounced it, but he didn't promote it either.
Right.
But what he did do is remain steadfast in his faith in the Lord. And so there was always just a peace around him when we talk or when I received his letters. And subsequently, I think it was back in about 2008, he was released from prison. And he then was back in LA, and he and I were trying to arrange something where either he could come out and visit with me or I could get out there and visit with him. And we couldn't, things weren't lining up. And I want to say it was within a year. I think he got out in 2007, and by 2008, within like a week's time, he was diagnosed with hepatitis and he died. So that was the second person in my musical career that I was very close with that had passed away. So that was that's kind of my little bumping into a national story.
Right. Well, let's get into a conspiracy theory. Do you think it was the FBI ATF that shot in and started the fire?
Oh, yeah.
Or because some people claim that David Koresh and the followers started.
No, we had enough conversations, and I trusted him enough to know that it was unprovoked. They made the first shot.
Right.
And then another weird thing is I met a guy in Denver who was part of a different cult years before that. Nothing that was on a militia level like that, but he had a guy that he knew that actually. And this guy's never lied to me about anything, but this guy had actually, this brother that he knew actually snuck into the cult during the time it was actually under siege by the ATF. Snuck in and snuck out during that time because he wanted to get in there and, I don't know, make some connection or find out, or I don't know what that whole story was about. But anybody that's ever been proximal to it that I've gotten direct information on the story from, has all concurred that it was now I know there was a lot of stuff that's been documented as far as what Koresh himself was, how he was handling his affairs and messing around with younger women and this and that, but as far as the actual the reason that they went to battle, it was the ATF.
Right.
I'm 100% sure.
Now, did they say they fired tear gas into it, or
he just he just remembers that they were just hanging, and they knew something was coming down, but he, like he said, he never lifted a firearm, never, that wasn't, and he was a pretty gentle guy, and I believe that about him. So yeah, that was an interesting time in life.
Wow.
Right?
I mean, 7 layers of Kevin Bacon, and how do you know Koresh?
Right, exactly.
That is crazy.
I've kind of had a Forrest Gump life, really. I mean, between living out in LA and that whole thing with Koresh, and then I lived down in Dallas briefly. Good buddy of mine from Denver here, Ray Bolander, was living down there playing in a band, and went down there and got to be around during the inception of Pantera and just as they were taking off. Right. And, it was just kind of neat. Seemed to always kind of be at some place in time when there was some large event happening, either musically or otherwise, that made life interesting.
Right. I remember seen Pantera, just kind of going everywhere. I seen Pantera at the Peppermint Beach Club in Virginia Beach. Mm-hmm. And Corrosion of Conformity opened up.
Oh, yeah, I like those guys.
Man.
Their drummer just died.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, he did. And so I I really liked the show that Corrosion put on, and I was just getting so mad because Pantera, they were at least an hour late.
Oh, really?
So with they opened up, and then there's this long hour.
Oh,
And the way the club was set up was, they had not big screen TVs, but the big boxy. They had TVs hanging from the ceiling and playing MTV all the time. Back when they played music,
right.
I mean, so they're in the middle of their set, just tearing it up, and I don't know if it was during a song or in between songs. An interview of Pantera came on the TV, and I remember Phil going, hey, let's watch this.
Oh no!
Are you kidding me? What? We're watching you,
Right. Right.
And I think they had to be on something to be that late. And
Yeah.
that they put on a good show, but I was more impressed with Corrosion.
I saw him 1989 at a club in Dallas called The Basement, and they were still doing clubs. They were just at that point where they were getting ready to take off. So, like I said, it was kind of always cool to be in these places in time. Like in L.A., I was at the tail end of that whole era that some people only ever saw on TV, and I got to be a little part of that before it died out. And then I got to be a part of the Dallas music scene, and then moving up to Colorado. That was really the bulk of my musical career was in Denver, Colorado.
Okay, well, let's talk about Denver and where you're living and what you're doing and your life you've established there.
Yeah, so I moved there in like the spring, late spring, it was late spring of '89. Had made a decision to bust out of Denver or to bust out of LA. Loaded. This is back when you could just move somewhere. It was like you didn't have to have. I don't know how Burlington is, but in the bigger cities, it's like you got to have first, last, security deposit. They run a credit check on you. You can't just move into an apartment.
Right.
You go through the rigmarole. And so, but back then you could. So it was just like, I just like packed everything up. I was actually living, my roommate at the time, and here's kind of another little 7 layers of bacon. But I was living, and I don't recall her name. I have a photograph of her in one of my photo albums. But I was living with this gal, and her boyfriend was roommates with Tom Araya from Slayer. So yeah, it was just weird. It was like I had this like 6 degrees of separation from everybody. But we were just platonic. When I say we were living together, we're just roommates. But
I was gonna say, you lived with this girl
No.
and her boyfriend.
no, we were just roommates, so I just was able to just up and leave because she took over the apartment, and I packed everything up in a little 5x8 U-Haul, hooked it up to my little Mercury Zephyr, and left in the middle of the night. Left L.A.
The Mercury Zephyrs, were those Pinto-looking things?
No, it was like a Lincoln. It looked like it was kind of like a generic Lincoln.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
I think.
They're kind of boxy.
Yeah. I think my grandparents had one.
Yeah.
Oh.
They don't even
Anyway.
make Mercuries anymore, as far as I know. But
Yeah.
anyhow, so I packed everything up, and I go, I'm going to leave at night because I didn't want my car to overheat. It was a little 6-cylinder. And so here I'm trekking through the deserts of, California and Nevada and Utah, and I'm just making my way, and I'm seeing some of this country I'd never seen before, because when we traveled to LA, we went the southern route.
Okay.
And here I'm going through these canyons and just amazing areas that just blew me away. And so I after about 3 or 4 days, I'd finally made my way into Colorado Springs, which just blew me away. When I remember getting, and here we'll date it as well, as I stopped and ran to a payphone and called my mom and said, Mom, I found the place I'm going to live the rest of my life.
Please deposit 35 cents to continue this call.
Right? And it was so just fundamental that all I did was I got a newspaper. I found an apartment. It was $150. There was no first, last deposit. It was just $150. It was a little efficiency apartment. Had a job within a couple days working as an artist, and then I started networking within, right away with other musicians in the area. And I was down there about a month. And then by that time, I was getting homesick. The economy was really bad down there. I hadn't been home for a couple years, and I was just like, well, I think I'm going to head back to Iowa. And I had everything packed up in my U-Haul. And here's another, like, chance situation. My buddies that I'd befriended down there took me to a club up in Denver called Bangles. It's weird because people associate Bangles with the all-girl band, but anybody from the Denver, Colorado area, or even the Colorado area in general, they know Bangles. It was like, of all the clubs I ever been to throughout the country, I mean, including L.A., Dallas, and EM, Bangles was the best. It was just 3 levels. It was like on Wayne's World. Do you remember that club?
Yeah.
That rock? That's what it was
Yeah.
like. It was
Okay.
just amazing. It was just, larger than life. And took me to a club up there. Met a girl. Story of my life.
There's probably a song about that. Met a
Right.
girl.
It was obviously had got up there, become intoxicated, met a girl. Long story short, met this girl. My U-Haul was loaded up, ready to go back to Iowa. 2 days later, I was moving my stuff into an apartment in Lakewood, Colorado, with this girl and her roommate. It sounds so petty, or petty's not the right word. It sounds pretty bad, but it is what it was. It was part of the story. And that's how I ended up in Denver. And then from there on, I started putting bands together. Had a band in the early 90s called On the Rocks. And there was a club down in Dallas that I went to called On the Rocks. And I thought, that's a pretty cool name. So started a band with that. One of the guys was a guy that still I'm friends with to this day. His name's Kevin Shaw. And put together On the Rocks. And we had that went on for a couple years, disbanded, and then I thought, well, I need to go back to school. I need to, I made the graduation from cutting my hair to a mullet, and and then even further on up, and I went back to school, just a community college, got a degree in respiratory therapy. Again, a very shallow decision, simply based on the fact that you could have long hair and work within that industry back then. People won't understand that now because there's no dress code for the most part. But back then, you probably remember certain jobs you just couldn't work with long hair.
Signs everywhere, signs.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I went back to school, spent a couple years doing that, got my degree in respiratory therapy, got out. By that time, had a pretty good job. Had a loft right outside downtown Denver. Life was going pretty good. And I just, at some point, by now we're talking 94, 95. Mm-hmm. So metal was dead. It was grunge, alternative, ska, whatever. It was just it was a smorgasbord. Yeah. And I know a lot of people are endeared to that. It just none of that worked for me. So I felt kind of lost. So I started writing a lot of songs on the acoustic and came up with some ballads and a couple poppy songs. And I put together this little 4-song demo. And I reached out to my buddy Kevin Shaw, who had been my lead guitarist in On the Rocks, and solicited him to come back in the studio and work with me on this 4-song demo, which he did. And so we went ahead and this was at the inception of digital recording. Mm-hmm. We were like in a studio where you had to back everything up on CD-ROMs. The CD-ROMs were $11 a piece. Yeah. It was at the very beginning, but we had the technology, and we had a fantastic engineer that's literally won like awards and stuff. This guy does stuff on a national level now. His name's John Dorick, and he programmed all of our drums. He did all the keyboards. I played some guitar and sang. Kevin did the leads. I played all the bass. And did a little 4-song demo, and we were pretty happy with it because it was anything before that was just pretty, like Foztech 8-track recorder Tascam quality, where you're bouncing tracks, and the production was not anything to get excited about. And so then we, after that, we said, let's start a band. Let's make a band out of this, which we did. We originally got a bass player and a drummer. And then not long thereafter, actually, a keyboardist. So there was a quintet right up front. And then we named the band, or rather I named the band Badragaz, which has kind of been there's pros and cons to it. A lot of people are first thing they're like Badra what or Baba, but
I was going to ask you how to pronounce the name.
so they say they don't. That's the kind of the issue that's a problem that the spelling what. What I like about it is if you Google it, there is nothing else. There's no confusion. If I say write this down, Bodragaz, and somebody goes and Googles that, the only thing that comes up is something associated with our band. And people go, well, how'd you get the name? And it was just the name of it. I was watching some downhill skiing from Bad Ragaz, Switzerland, but it's spelled differently. It's B-A-D, and it's 2 words, Badragaz.
Okay.
So I thought but it's pronounced Bad, and I thought people would misinterpret as Bad Ragaz or something, So I just brought the 2 words together and changed the A with the O, and that's how it became Bad Ragaz. And that was the band that up till 2 years ago, I think we'd celebrated a 22-year anniversary.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
with the same guys or
no? It was a changeover. Kevin, the guy that formed the band with me, took a hiatus for about 10 years in the middle of it, where he had gotten married, had kids, and whatnot. Mm-hmm. The bass player, his name was Jim Westcott. He'd stayed with me pretty much through the whole thing except till the very end. And then we had a variety, as with any bands, a variety of drummers.
Just disappeared, catch on fire on stage.
Right. And that was the band that was kind of my lifeblood. That was my main band. I mean, I started off obviously in high school with Crystal Vision and had a few projects along the way, but Bad Ragaz was my baby. I wrote the majority of the music and lyrics, and probably after the first or second CD, I started actually producing the albums, and so it was my project.
What would you classify that? Because it's not your regular rock and roll. It's a little different. How do you describe it?
Well, it's got a little bit of a lot of stuff. It's, some people, the older folks will listen to it and they'll be like, that's heavy metal. Not really heavy metal. Heavy metal to me is Priest or somebody, right. Pantera or something like that. But definitely hard rock, melodic hard rock, but progressive overtones. When I was up at my work training this last week, one of the younger guys pulled it up on his phone, and I always like to get the opinions of younger people. Mm-hmm. And he pulled up one of the videos that we had done recently, and he was just blown. First off, people are usually like really blown away because when you tell them, yeah, I'm in a band, they kind of have this image of garage band, and yeah, I'm sure it's really professional. And then they see what we did, and they're like, oh my God, this is like, you guys are the real deal. And I said, well, what do you think it sounds like? And he said, Metallica meets Styx. And I don't know, that's probably the best of all the musical correlations that people have passed down throughout the years. I think that probably hits it because we've been very vocally, vocal harmony dominated. Everything's melodic, no matter how heavy it is. But there is especially as the years went on, we got quite a bit heavier, and so there was always that kind of Metallica heavy edge portion of it.
Very cool. So are you guys still together today, or on
it's
hiatus?
It's kind of a weird thing because I had some things in my personal life that came about that I just had to back out at that time. Mm-hmm. Had to take care of my things in my personal life that took priority over music. Bad Ragaz is like I'm kind of like the David Coverdale situation. You know how he is with Whitesnake. He's the only one that's ever carried. But as long as he's alive, there's always a Whitesnake. And I guess
they're going out on tour this coming summer,
right? And so for me, it's kind of the same thing. When I say, is it no longer? Well, no longer as far as they're an active band and we're rehearsing, and not so much. But as far as I'm concerned, and my buddy Kevin, who was the guy that started the band with me, it's always still alive because, we just recorded our most recent music video last year. Just this last year, we finished it up in 2019. And there was no true band at that time. Mm-hmm. We'd been broken up for a year and a half, but we still went and ventured out and did a video. And so I'm still doing some music videos. Kevin and I have talked about going in and doing some more material. But like right now, I'm just focusing on a solo project.
Okay.
I know it sounds weird because Badragaz was kind of my thing, but it's just nice because it's a departure from what I did with the musical style of what I did with that band. So
Okay. So, and are you in the studio working on that?
yeah,
or?
I'm doing all my pre-production now because I don't have a whole band to sit down and go, here's my stuff. Everybody come up with their parts.
Mm-hmm.
I've had to basically go into Pro Tools and create my drum tracks and some bass lines and guitars and keyboards and kind of put everything together. And then I have a really good friend of mine out there that's going to come in and do all the real drums and Kevin will come in and do guitar leads. But it's a bit more kind of a more modern sounding, I guess it'd be the best way to put it. Not quite as heavy.
Cool. Well, tell me about your life out there besides the band.
Yeah, I've been married I've been with my wife for 17 years now. We've been married for 15. Her name's Jamie. Hi, Jamie. I love you. She's the most beautiful woman I've ever known. I met her. She's from Texas originally, and I met her in Colorado many, many years ago. And at the time, I have a young son from a previous relationship. His name is Elijah, and she had a young son from her prior marriage, which was his name's Seth. They're both 20. They're 3 months apart. Mm-hmm. People always thought they were twins growing up, but they're both 20 now, and they're good boys to have in the family. And then we decided to have one of our own later on in life, mm-hmm. and that's our youngest son, Levi, and he's 8 years old.
I'll be honest with you, when I've seen on Facebook, I was like, man, that is. I couldn't handle that. But then again, my youngest is going on 10, and that was when I was 40.
Right.
I couldn't do it today.
Yeah, no more. That's all we need. But so we got the five of us. Both the older boys are in college, so it's kind of my wife, myself, and our youngest son. We live in the suburbs of Denver in a beautiful city called Arvada, Colorado, right with the inception of with the legalization of weed and everything else out there.
I was going to ask you about that.
Colorado has exploded, so
yeah.
It has become extremely expensive and congested, but I still love it. It's really, I've been out there 30 years, so I mean, Burlington's my home in a sense as far as where I was born and raised, but Colorado is really where my heart's at.
Right. With the illegal, everybody jokes. I remember when Seattle, which I lived out there in Seattle, late '80s.
Oh, really?
Mid '80s, late '80s. We moved out there. I think 1980 was my first Thanksgiving out there that I remember.
Oh, okay.
Stayed there for a while. Family problems, moved back to Burlington, realized, hey, that was such a cool place. I need to go back. So after I graduated from high school, I went back out there. And
that would have been right around the grunge scene.
Yes. I seen Queensryche.
Really?
At a roller skating rink.
Oh, my gosh.
Yes. Alice in Chains was not a grunge band. They were a rock and roll band.
Wow.
Of course, the sound comes along and everybody, tries to go after what's going to make
mm-hmm.
money. Never seen Nirvana, but I remember they were a up and coming. I lived out there when the lead singer of Mother Love Bone, Andrew Wood, when he passed away.
Mm-hmm.
Now I can't say I was into Mother Love Bone because I was just returned to the area.
Right.
But I remember reading articles about this guy and how they filled up the Coliseum for his funeral. It's like, whoa,
mm-hmm.
that guy must have been, something important, which kind of spawned off to Pearl Jam. And about that time, I was already in 1990, joined the Navy and
mm-hmm.
out of the scene. So,
but that's a fun adventure.
So Seattle and Colorado. Broncos, when they played the Super Bowl, everybody's like, yeah, it's smoke against smoke and whatever.
Smokable.
Yeah. Illinois just legalized it.
Yeah, I heard that.
And I'm kind of has it made a negative or a positive impact, or just a yeah?
Yeah, I haven't seen any difference in Colorado. I think the problem was the secret got out on Colorado. It was
Okay.
really a best kept secret for many, many years because we have extremely mild weather. We're right along the mountains. It's very arid. We don't have the problem with mosquitoes and flies and gnats, all that stuff back here. And we do have winters, but our typically it snows and then it melts within a day or two, and it's sunny. We have 3 days of sun a year out there, so it's really kind of it's an awesome place to live. But we have no vacancy. Just give that disclaimer. So
Colorado is closed.
Colorado's closed. Nobody else can come. But I really haven't seen any changes in that. I was just talking to somebody about that the other day. I was saying, I hope with all these other states that are legalizing, that maybe some of the folks that moved out there because, they wanted to have that liberty, will maybe now return to their place of origin.
Right, right. Yeah, I know a lot of medical cases moved out there. I feel bad for the children.
Oh, absolutely.
The children
100%.
that they give CBD
For seizures and whatnot.
Yes.
Yeah.
Amazing stuff. Why are we keeping that illegal?
Yeah, it makes no sense to me.
Yeah, I feel sorry for those people, and I've read the stories and I've seen documentaries about it, and I think the medical side has a very legitimate.
Oh, absolutely. I think it should be legalized federally, throughout the United States.
Yeah.
Anything that's for a medicinal value
Yeah.
that helps people, absolutely. And then they can wrestle whether they want it to be legalized, recreationally.
Yeah, and I think that recreationally, it's gonna eventually, I think, gonna be legalized everywhere
Yeah.
because
Makes a lot of money.
it's a lot of money on taxes, and
You mentioned Illinois, and from what I understand, Illinois kind of ran out of money. And so I think they did that out of necessity. And I
Yeah.
think a lot of other states are going to follow suit, and they're going to say, wait a minute, we can make a lot of money on taxation here. So
yeah, and but I don't think it has as much effect as alcohol does.
in what respect?
A person becoming addicted to the
Oh,
point
yeah.
as alcohol. You can tell an alcoholic. We used to be able to tell the stoners, because that was, yeah, man. Half of it was an act. I know some, prominent people that you would never know, and it's not, they're, getting stoned and, it's, hey, I can go to sleep at night.
Right. Yeah. I never, in high school, I tried it. Anybody that knows me could back this up. It wasn't really my thing, I was just like into, I don't even know I was into drinking beer. I was into the socializing and trying to meet girls and stuff like that, but I did, later on, in like my 20s and 30s and whatnot, I indulged being in Colorado, and that was before it was legal, disclaimer. And, but then, I quit several years ago, and I just, but I still support it. I don't think I don't think kids need to be doing it.
Oh,
I think that they need to let their brains formulate to the point that they do. But, I just think it's kind of hypocritical to say you can have a liquor store. And you asked the question earlier, is it as detrimental, I think, as alcohol? I would say alcohol probably destroys more lives and more families than marijuana ever would.
Yeah.
I think that it definitely has certain repercussions on an individual. It can make them, definitely demotivated. As far as being a
Colorado is really slow these days.
yeah, as far as being a gateway drug, I think it's a gateway to the fridge.
Right.
But other than that, I just, I don't know. It's just not even on my radar because I don't do it.
Right.
But if somebody asked me, if it came up for a vote again, I would still vote because I'm like, either way, you need to maybe make alcohol illegal, which I like to have a drink. So,
and I've watched some documentaries and to the point where people are saying that it is racially motivated, and I can see that. Where more African Americans have been thrown in prison.
in that respect, yeah,
just over. And I think, when Illinois did it, they started releasing people that had just marijuana. You know, yeah,
Far bigger crimes to be worrying about. And I think
Yeah.
you're right. I think there's a lot of people, African Americans and probably Hispanics and all kinds of different folks that have been placed in prison, unjustly based on the crime they committed.
yeah.
You know.
And I think it's been traced back to the Nixon era of they specifically knew that it was they were doing this to control the poorer African American population. But yeah, that's neither here nor there. So, have we missed anything?
Well, I would say probably the only the thing that probably the crowning moment of my musical career was when we opened for Bon Jovi at the Pepsi Center.
I was going to ask you who all of you opened up and played.
Opened
with.
up for a lot of bands over the years. I couldn't even tell you all of them, but that was the crowning moment, and that was because we won a contest where it was a regional contest. I mean, amongst folks in Arizona and Utah and New Mexico, Colorado, in that area of the country, and we actually got to perform. We were direct support before Bon Jovi. It was the 2006 Have a Nice Day tour, which was the second largest tour in the world that year, and we were direct support. So we weren't like the first of 5 bands, or we didn't open for the opening band. We played a 6-song set, 30 minutes is all we got, and then Bon Jovi came on.
Right.
And it was just surreal. It was, I don't even know if we had the best performance. It certainly wasn't our greatest lineup, nor our best material at that time, but just that whole experience was very ethereal. It was we went on stage. By the time we were on our 3rd song, it was standing room only.
Right.
And so nothing will ever compete on that level for me ever again.
That's, wow, have that in your memory bank would be awesome.
Yeah, the cool little story with that was after we found out we won the contest, I literally blew my voice out screaming and yelling. I mean, to the point where I had like no voice. And then so we found out, I think, on a Monday, and we had to perform on a Thursday, something like that. And I was doing radio interviews all week. My voice was, I was talking like this.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like freaking out. And I had no idea. I remember I literally had like a nervous breakdown. My wife and I were standing in the bedroom talking like a day before the concert, and I just go, I don't know what I'm going to do. I can't even talk. My voice is gone. And we showed up at the arena that day. It was so weird. It's like, here's your dressing rooms, and do you need anything, dry cleaned before the show? Do you, there was food and drinks, and
Take out the green M&Ms.
it was so awesome. And so we're getting ready. Where it was at the Pepsi Center in Denver, Colorado.
Okay.
And so we're in like the visitors room as far as like when they had basketball or hockey or whatnot.
Okay.
So there's like a series of showers, and we had so much room. It wasn't like a backstage per se. It was like we had the visitors room at the Pepsi Center. And so we're back there, and I just remember being in the shower, and I'm like trying to sing, and nothing is coming out. I'm just like, I didn't know what I was gonna do. And we got out, and before we went out on the stage, pardon me, we walked out, and we were putting some of our guitars out there, and people were starting to come in about that time. And I heard somebody from clear up at the top of the balcony go, "Bodregaz!" And I don't know, something just came over me, and I was just like, man, it's going to be okay. And we went back, and we did kind of one of these, I got everybody together, and some guys were believers, some weren't, but I just go, I don't care. We're going to pray. And I led a prayer, and we all huddled up, and we prayed. And we got out there on stage, and the very first song was a song that I'd written that was Bodregaz wasn't a Christian band, but I'm a Christian, and a lot of the lyrics.
I'm going to say I've noticed in your lyrics, I've like, I could tell that you have a faith.
Yeah,
a
yeah.
Christian
So
faith.
the very first song we played was called "Awaken," which is kind of a song about spiritual awakening. And the register that I sing in on that one is like the very first notes are some of the highest register that I sing. It's like rise again and then I fall, but full voice. And I come out and I started, dagga 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 dagga, and I start singing, and I just came out. It came out like a canary, and it was the most. And then all of a sudden, I was almost like, I was looking over 30 minutes later at my bass player, and we're both looking at each other. We go, what just happened? We don't even hardly remember it.
Sure.
But it was like, it almost reminded me, and you've come from this generation, so you may remember this, but the Brady Bunch episode where Carol Brady threw her voice out, and I think like Cindy prayed for her or something like that, and her voice was completely gone, but she got up and did the church show the next day and sang. That's exactly, and I'm not exaggerating. My wife, anybody could give. In fact, when we rehearsed that week, the 2 or 3 days we had to rehearse before the show, we had I couldn't sing. We just did it instrumentally, and the guys that did the backup vocals did their parts. When we got out there, the Lord gave me a voice in that, and like I said, it was just like there was a divine presence that was there. And then the coolest thing is, after the show, we got to, or no, it wasn't after the show. It was actually, it was after we went on. We got to meet Bon Jovi backstage, and they walked up. And I just remember one of the first things John said to me, which is just so corny, but he's like, "Hey man, did you save any of the chicks for us?" I'm like, "Whatever." And it was so funny because each one of us could. It's like when we met them, and it wasn't any kind of idolatry, because honestly, I've never really even been that big of a Bon Jovi fan. No offense to those that like him, it's not the kind of music that I really listen to.
Right.
But when they walked out, they were rock stars. We were a rock band.
Right.
I mean, it was just you could see it. Well, we got to take a picture back in the hallway, all of us together, and it's their publicity team or whatever did that with any of the bands throughout the nation that won that. And so we're standing back there, and there's now on the photograph, and you got to keep in mind, this is a professional photographer with a professional camera. This isn't somebody, and it was perfect lighting and everything. There's an orb right over my heart in that photograph.
I'm going to check that out.
And it's on, I probably even have it on my phone. I can show you. There's an orb, and it's right over my heart. Now, here's the other weird thing. My dad was there that week. It was everything was serendipity. My mom had already made plans to be there that weekend, and this was unbeknownst to any of the competition as far as who was going to win the competition. She just made a plan to come out in February that year. She happened to be there. My dad came out. My brother, my sister, my aunt from Minnesota. People that had never even been there before came out. My dad was sitting with my son Elijah, my oldest son, and he was maybe 10 at the time. He's 7. And there's a picture of them in the dining room at my house, and there's an orb over. It's with my dad and my son, and there's an orb over his heart as well.
Oh, wow.
It's the weirdest thing. And at one time, I merged the two photos together, and I gave a little story on that. I went through all of my photographs. I don't have any photographs in my collection, and I have a pretty extensive collection of photos. I don't have anything with orbs.
Right.
But I have an orb from the Bon Jovi show where I had it right over my heart, and I really felt as though there was a divine presence with me that day, because I couldn't have done for one, I don't even think we could have arrived. We were the underdogs in that, because we went up against some regional bands out there that had a huge following. There was a band that had this is back in MySpace days, but they had 40,000 people on we were just a fledgling band that was kind of scraping by in Denver, and
Right.
so it was really cool, and it's just kind of a testimony I like to share about that whole event.
That's cool. Let's spend a little bit of time about your faith. When did you get saved? What happened? Was it a burning bush moment or.
Well, I mean, growing up, I always believed in God. My grandma was a Christian and never practicing or anything as far as me. I just always knew there was a God. Never part of my life in any respect that I invited God into my life. But when my dad, about the time I was 17, 18 or whatever, prior to that, he had been struggling with alcoholism and whatnot. And there was a time in his life where he just basically quit, just cold turkey. And those of us that were most proximal to him amongst our family were just like standing there with our jaws on the ground. What just happened? This is a guy that everything changed overnight. And he shared his testimony with me. And it's, that's, personal thing between he and I, but it was a testimony enough for me to know that there was something divine there. And
Right.
and then he shared the word with me. And I remember receiving the Lord probably again when I was 17, 18 years old, going out into the world. And it's hard when you're a Christian and you don't have the body of Christ around you or a mentor or whatnot. And so I'm still kind of struggling. I'm a believer and I have given my life to Christ, but I'm still trying to live in the world. And that was a long time. That was a good 12, 15 years of just this torment and struggle to where I finally got to this place where I realized, wait a minute, I got to lay down. I got to die to the old man. And just, for clarification, a lot of people go, well, I still see you, out at a bar having a beer or whatever. It's like, I'm not claiming to be perfect. And I'm also not an alcoholic and I'm not a drunkard. I'm just an imperfect guy who found a relationship with the Lord as my key to salvation. And I just try to kind of move through life and make choices according to how I believe God would want me to. And, I fail and I make mistakes, and I've made a lot of mistakes. I was just thinking about my life the other day going, man, what a hot mess. But the consistency through the whole thing was the Lord seemed to always have my back,
Right.
and that's why I'm at where I'm at now today, that I'm even alive, that I'm blessed to have a beautiful wife and 3 healthy children. And, I got a decent job and I live in one of the greatest places in the country. My parents are still with me. And so, the Lord seems to have a way of taking a messed up situation and making the best story out of it.
Absolutely. Let's give some information about the band. I'm not even going to try to pronounce it.
Bod Ragaz.
I wonder if we put it into Google if they could pronounce it. That would be an interesting thing.
Yeah.
I'll do that at the end of this.
Give that a shot.
Where can they find information about the band, the recordings?
Yeah, we got, there's still a Facebook page. I took down our .com site. I don't think most folks even use that anymore with all the social media. But we do have a Facebook page still where we just posted the most recent video for a song called God I. Amazing video. If anybody has not seen it yet, I encourage you to go on there and watch it because it's supernatural. And the last couple of videos we did, we worked with a professional music director on those. So very, very proud of those. But you can go to Facebook. Obviously, anybody can find connections through my Facebook page, or they can just go to Facebook and type in Bodragaz, which is Bodragaz. And that'll lead them to there. There's plenty of media content, videos, audio. The CD that you have there is the last audio recording we did, which was a greatest hits, so to speak.
Okay.
It's titled 20, which it celebrated 20 years, and we put 20 of our best songs on there. And pretty proud of that. I went back and remixed and remastered, and it's probably my finest audio production. Very proud of it. And yeah, I mean, there's still audio out there. We still have CDs available. The videos, we got probably 8-10 videos floating around on YouTube. And so if anybody's interested, they can check that out.
Okay, very cool. Well, Michael, thank you so much for
30 years too long, bro.
Yeah. Coming in and talking on the King Kong
Thanks
Trail.
for inviting me.
And we'll get this linked up to you on Facebook, and maybe we can get some listeners in Colorado.
Yeah. Colorado's closed.
It's closed. Yeah. That could, there's a song in that. So once again, thank you so much. Safe
Yeah.
travels when you go back home. Tell your wife and kids hello, and
Yeah.
and all that kind of stuff.
Thanks for having me over today, bud.
Thank you for coming back and sharing your time with us.
All right. Take care. God bless.